I used to think betrayal would feel like a knife in the back. Instead, it felt like watching a stranger wear my wife's face. 7 years. That's how long we'd been married when Sarah decided I was disposable. 7 years of shared dreams, joint bank accounts, and me believing that love meant something more than convenience. The evening it all unraveled started like any other Tuesday. I pulled into our driveway at 6:47 p.m., same time I'd been coming home for 3 years since my promotion to senior network administrator. Nothing suggested that inside my wife was preparing to detonate our life together, but much like that, I found her in the kitchen, and that's when the alarm bells should have gone off. Sarah was dressed to kill, literally, as it turned out. She wore the black wrap dress I'd bought her for our 5th anniversary. Her makeup was flawless, applied with precision she usually reserved for job interviews. The scent hit me next. Unfamiliar perfume, something expensive that definitely wasn't her usual vanilla body spray. "You look incredible," I said, setting my laptop bag down. "Where are we going tonight?" Her phone lay face down beside her purse. She glanced at it nervously before looking anywhere but at me. "We need to talk, David." The words every married man dreads. I loosened my tie and tried to read her expression, but Sarah had always been good at compartmentalizing. Tonight, that clinical detachment was aimed at me. "What's wrong?" I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want the answer. She straightened her shoulders and delivered the killing blow with the same tone she might use to discuss weekend plans. "I need you to leave. Tonight. Don't make this harder than it has to be." The words hung in the air between us. I stared at this woman I'd shared a bed with for 7 years, looking for some trace of the Sarah who used to laugh at my terrible jokes. This stranger offered no such comfort. "Leave?" I repeated, certain I'd misheard. "Sarah, what the hell are you talking about?" "I've been thinking about us, about our future." Her voice carried that practiced quality that told me this speech had been rehearsed. "We've grown apart, David. We want different things now. We discussed this last month when we talked about starting a family. You said—" "I know what I said." She cut me off with surgical precision. "People change." "I've changed." The rage started as a slow burn in my chest. Not explosive anger, but something colder and more calculating, because even as my heart was breaking, my mind was cataloging details. The expensive perfume, the formal dress, the way she kept checking her phone. "There's someone else?" I said. It wasn't a question. Sarah's composure cracked for just a moment, a flicker of something that might have been guilt. Then the mask slipped back into place. "That's not what this is about." "Nonsense." I took a step toward her and she actually flinched. "How long, Sarah?" "David, please. Let's handle this like adults." "Adults?" The word came out as bitter laughter. "Adults don't ambush their spouses and demand they leave their own home." Her eyes flashed with something ugly. "If you don't leave willingly, I'll call the police and tell them you're being threatening. How do you think that will look in divorce proceedings?" There it was. The nuclear option, delivered with casual cruelty. I stood there in my own kitchen and realized I was looking at a complete stranger. The Sarah I'd married would never have weaponized the legal system against me. I could have exploded. Could have shouted and demanded answers. Instead, something cold and analytical clicked into place. If Sarah wanted to play hardball, she'd just taught me the rules. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll pack a bag." Relief flooded her features, quickly followed by something that looked like disappointment. Maybe she'd wanted the dramatic confrontation. I walked upstairs with steady steps, my mind already racing ahead to implications and strategies. In our bedroom, I packed a week's worth of clothes with mechanical efficiency, but before I left, I made one stop. The utility room in our basement housed the central hub for the home security system I'd installed 2 years ago. Sarah had complained about the cameras, said they made her feel like we were living in a fortress. I disabled them 6 months ago to keep the peace, but the hardware was still there, still functional. It took me less than 5 minutes to reactivate the system. Motion sensors, door contacts, and yes, the cameras I'd strategically placed to monitor entry points and common areas, all feeding to a cloud storage system that Sarah had never bothered to understand. When I emerged from the basement, Sarah was waiting by the front door with poorly concealed impatience. Her phone had buzzed twice while I was downstairs. "David, I want you to know this isn't easy for me," she said, as I shouldered my duffel bag. I looked at her one last time. Really looked at her. The perfect makeup, the expensive dress, the designer perfume, all for someone else. "I'm sure it's not," I replied, and walked out of my own home. I sat in my car in the driveway for 27 minutes. Long enough to see the headlights that turned into our street at 7:43 p.m. Long enough to watch a silver BMW park where my car usually sat. Long enough to see him walk up to my front door like he owned the place. Through the kitchen window, I watched my wife embrace another man in the home we'd built together. Watched her offer him wine from the bottle we'd been saving for our anniversary. Watched her laugh with genuine delight, the kind I hadn't heard from her in months. That's when I understood. This wasn't a spontaneous affair. This was a planned replacement. I wasn't losing my wife to another man. I was being discarded for an upgrade she'd already selected. As I finally drove toward the Comfort Inn on Route 9, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. Sarah had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She'd taught me that love was a battlefield. Now she was about to learn that I'd always been better at strategy than she was. 3 days into my exile at the Comfort Inn, I discovered that surveillance footage has a way of turning heartbreak into something far more dangerous: clarity. I'd barely slept since Tuesday night, surviving on gas station coffee and the kind of rage that burns clean and cold. My laptop sat open on the flimsy motel desk, displaying camera feeds from what used to be my home. Sarah had no idea she was being watched. The footage told a story worse than I'd imagined. By Wednesday morning, the man from the BMW, Marcus, I'd learned from their conversations, had moved in completely. His clothes hung in my closet, his toiletries crowded my bathroom counter. He ate breakfast at my kitchen table while reading the newspaper I'd subscribed to for 5 years. But it was the audio that truly educated me about the scope of their betrayal. "God, I can't believe how easy that was." Sarah's voice came through my laptop speakers as I watched her pour coffee for Marcus on Wednesday morning. "I thought he'd put up more of a fight." Marcus laughed, loosening his tie. Even through the security camera, I could see he was handsome in that polished lawyer way. Expensive suit, perfect teeth, the kind of confidence that comes from never having doors closed in your face. "You said he was passive-aggressive. Sounds like he's just passive." David always takes the path of least resistance. It's what made him so easy to live with, and what made him so easy to leave. I paused the recording, staring at my wife's face on the screen. Easy to live with, 7 years of marriage reduced to a personality flaw that had outlived its usefulness. The conversation continued. "How long before the divorce is final?" Marcus asked. "My lawyer says 6 months if he doesn't contest it, maybe less if I can prove emotional abuse." "Can you prove it?" he asked. Sarah's smile was cold enough to freeze hell. "David never raised his voice to me in 7 years. But that's not what I'll tell the court." I rewound that section 3 times, making sure I captured every word. Sarah wasn't just leaving me, she was planning to destroy me, frame me as an abuser to ensure she got the house, the assets, maybe even alimony. My phone rang, jarring me from the recording. "Unknown number. Mr. David, this is Eleanor Reeves from Reeves Family Law. You left a message yesterday about needing legal representation?" Eleanor Reeves came highly recommended by my colleague James, who'd gone through his own nightmare divorce. She had a reputation for being ruthless when her clients were wronged and surgical in her approach to evidence. "Yes, thank you for calling back. I need to discuss divorce proceedings and some complications that have arisen. Can you be here at 2 o'clock today?" Eleanor's office occupied the top floor of a converted Victorian house downtown, all exposed brick and modern furniture. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with prematurely gray hair she wore like a badge of honor, and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. "Tell me everything," she said. "And I mean everything. People lie to their lawyers all the time, and it always comes back to destroy them." I told her about Tuesday night. about the surveillance system, about the recordings I'd gathered. I'd played her selected clips on my laptop, watching her expression shift from professional interest to something approaching predatory satisfaction. "Your wife is planning to claim abuse?" she asked after hearing the breakfast conversation. "Among other things. I suspect she's been planning this for months." Eleanor leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. "David, I'm going to explain something that might save your life. Washington is a no-fault divorce state, which means infidelity alone won't determine asset division. But abuse allegations, even false ones, can devastate a man's life permanently. Your job, your reputation, your ability to see future children, all of it can disappear based on accusations alone." The words hit like physical blows. "But I have evidence that she's lying." "Evidence is only as good as its legal admissibility. How did you obtain these recordings?" "The security system is registered in my name. I installed it. I'm still the legal owner of the house." Eleanor nodded slowly. "That works in our favor. Washington is a one-party consent state for recording, and you're recording on property you legally own. But there's something else we need to discuss." She pulled out a legal pad and began writing. "False abuse allegations in divorce proceedings are serious. If we can prove she's committing perjury and attempting to defraud the court, there can be criminal consequences. Real consequences. I want her to face real consequences. Be careful what you wish for. Revenge is expensive, and it has a way of consuming the person seeking it." She looked up from her notes. "That said, if someone tries to destroy you with lies, you have every right to defend yourself with truth." I left Eleanor's office with a clear understanding of my legal position and a strategy that felt both surgical and devastating. But it was the conversation I had with James over drinks that night that truly changed everything. "How's the surveillance going?" he asked, nursing his second beer. "It's educational. I'm learning exactly how much my wife hates me." "What about the guy? You figure out who he is yet?" "Marcus something, lawyer at Sarah's firm, drives a BMW. The trip." James nearly choked on his beer. "Marcus? Tall guy, dark hair, looks like he's stepped out of a magazine ad. You know him?" "Marcus Whitfield. He represented my buddy Tom in a contract dispute last year. Guy's got a reputation for being brilliant and completely unethical. Also married to a doctor, if I remember correctly." The last piece clicked into place. Marcus wasn't just cheating on me with my wife. He was cheating on his own wife. A wife who had no idea her husband was destroying two marriages simultaneously. That night, back in my motel room, I began constructing what would become phase 2 of my new life strategy. Sarah had taught me that marriage was just another business transaction. Marcus had taught me that lawyers think they're smarter than everyone else. They were both about to learn that IT professionals are very good at finding people's vulnerabilities. As I drifted off to sleep for the first time in days, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Tuesday night: anticipation. Sarah and Marcus thought they'd won. They had no idea the game was just beginning. And unlike them, I'd always been patient enough to play the long game. Finding Dr. Diana Whitfield required exactly the kind of methodical research that Sarah had always dismissed as David's computer obsession. 3 hours of cross-referencing social media profiles, professional listings, and public records gave me everything I needed. Her medical practice address, her schedule, even her preferred coffee shop. Dr. Diana Whitfield was a pediatric surgeon at Seattle Children's Hospital, the kind of person who saved lives before most people finished their morning coffee. Her LinkedIn profile showed a woman in her late 30s with intelligent eyes and effortless confidence. I found her Thursday morning at Grind Coffee, the small shop 3 blocks from the hospital where her online reviews indicated she stopped most mornings at 7:15 a.m. She sat alone at a corner table, reviewing what looked like patient files while sipping coffee. Even in scrubs and a white coat, she had an elegance that felt natural rather than constructed. "Dr. Whitfield?" I approached her table slowly, hands visible, posture non-threatening. "I'm David. I know this sounds strange, but I think we need to talk about our spouses." She looked up sharply, taking in my appearance with the kind of quick assessment that probably saved lives in surgery. I'd dressed carefully, business casual, clean-shaven, wedding ring still on my finger. I'm sorry, do I know you? Her voice carried a slight southern accent and the authority of someone accustomed to making life or death decisions. No, but I think you know my wife, Sarah. She works at Whitfield, Morrison and Associates. Deanna's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. I'm not sure what you're trying to... Your husband Marcus is having an affair with my wife. I said it quietly, matter-of-factly. I have proof. The words hit her like a physical blow. Her coffee cup trembled slightly as she set it down, and for a moment, the competent surgeon disappeared, replaced by a woman who just learned her world wasn't what she thought it was. That's not possible, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I sat down across from her, moving slowly. Diana. May I call you Diana? I know how this sounds. 3 days ago, I would have said the same thing. But I have video evidence, recorded conversations, and a timeline that goes back at least 2 months. She stared at me with the intensity of someone trying to diagnose a complex case. Show me. I'd prepared for this moment, selecting the most damning but least intimate footage. My tablet displayed security camera footage of Marcus entering my house Tuesday night, and a timestamp showing Sarah's call to his phone 30 minutes earlier. Then audio of their Wednesday morning conversation about how easy it had been to get rid of me. Diana watched in complete silence, her surgeon's composure intact even as her personal world collapsed. When the recordings ended, she sat back and closed her eyes. I knew something was wrong, she said finally. The late nights, the new clothes, the way he started protecting his phone like classified information. She opened her eyes and looked directly at me. How long have you known? Since Tuesday night when she kicked me out so he could move in. Move in? Diana's voice cracked slightly. Marcus told me he was working on a big case that required late nights at the office. He hasn't been home in 3 days. The casual cruelty stunned even me. While I'd been processing my wife's betrayal in a motel room, Diana had been sleeping alone, believing her husband was working late. Diana, there's something else. I pulled up another file. My lawyer suggested I investigate Marcus's professional background. I think you should see this. The financial records I'd uncovered told a disturbing story. Marcus's billable hours didn't match his firm's client payments. Expensive purchases, including a $3,000 0-cent necklace I'd seen Sarah wearing, couldn't be explained by his salary alone. Jesus Christ, Diana whispered, scanning the documents. He's been skimming from client escrow accounts. I've been wondering how he could afford... She trailed off, pieces clicking into place. The weekend in Vancouver, he said, was a conference. The new watch. He bought your wife jewelry with stolen money. We sat in silence, two strangers bound together by betrayal and the realization that our spouses weren't just unfaithful. They were criminals. What do you want from me? Deanna asked finally. Nothing. Everything. I don't know. I closed the tablet and leaned forward. Diana, they think they're so much smarter than us. Sarah's planning to claim I abused her to get the house. Marcus is stealing money to buy her gifts. They're living in my home, sleeping in my bed, and laughing about how easy we were to fool. Something shifted in Diana's expression, the moment a surgeon decides which approach will save the patient's life. What kind of evidence would you need to destroy them? She asked. Legally or personally? Both. For the next hour, we planned like generals preparing for war. Diana had access to Marcus's financial records through their joint accounts. She could document the stolen money, trace the expenditures, and provide sworn testimony. I had surveillance footage, recorded conversations, and evidence of premeditated fraud. There's one more thing, Diana said as we prepared to leave. Marcus mentioned that Sarah's been consulting with divorce lawyers for months. He thought it was funny that you had no idea what was coming. The final piece clicked into place. This wasn't a spontaneous affair that had spiraled out of control. This was a calculated assassination of my marriage, planned and executed while Sarah kissed me goodbye each morning and asked about my day each evening. How long will you need to gather the financial evidence? I asked. Give me a week. I want to be thorough. Diana stood and extended her hand. David, I want you to know, I'm not doing this just for revenge. Marcus violated his professional ethics, stole from clients, and destroyed 2 marriages. He needs to face real consequences. As I shook her hand, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Tuesday night. Hope. Not for reconciliation or forgiveness, but for justice. Sarah and Marcus had made one critical error in their planning. They'd assumed their victims would remain victims. They'd never considered the possibility that the people they'd discarded might be more dangerous than the people they'd chosen. Walking back to my car, I felt the last vestiges of the old David, the trusting husband, the man who took people at face value, finally die. In his place stood someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more patient. Sarah wanted a war. She was about to get one. And unlike her, I'd actually done my reconnaissance. The morning I destroyed Sarah's life began at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after she'd destroyed mine. I sat in my car across from the Whitfield Morrison & Associates building, watching early arriving lawyers stride through the lobby with their expensive briefcases and misplaced confidence. In 2 hours, their carefully ordered world would become chaos. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana. Financial documentation complete. State bar complaint filed. Ready when you are. Eleanor's sedan pulled up beside me at exactly 7:30 a.m. Through her passenger window, I could see the manila folders that would end Sarah's marriage, Marcus's career, and both their futures. Last chance to reconsider, Eleanor said, rolling down her window. Once we file these papers, there's no going back. They made their choice, I replied. Now they get to live with the consequences. At 8:15 a.m., Diana emerged from the building's elevator and walked calmly toward the reception desk. She wore a navy blue suit that suggested both professionalism and authority. In her hands, she carried a folder containing 18 months of financial records, bank statements, and documented evidence of Marcus's embezzlement. Through the lobby windows, I watched her speak to the receptionist, then to a security guard, then to a man in an expensive suit who I assumed was one of the senior partners. Diana's body language remained controlled, even as she delivered information that would destroy the firm's reputation. At 8:23 a.m., Eleanor entered the same building through a different entrance, carrying divorce papers, recorded evidence of planned perjury, and a restraining order that would prevent Sarah from accessing our joint accounts. She also carried a formal complaint to the state licensing board detailing Sarah's plan to commit perjury in court proceedings. At 8:31 a.m., my phone rang. Mr. David, this is Detective Martinez with the Seattle Police Department. We've received a complaint about financial crimes involving Marcus Whitfield. We understand you may have relevant evidence? I do. When would you like to meet? How about now? At 8:47 a.m., I walked into the law firm's marble lobby carrying a tablet loaded with surveillance footage, recorded conversations, and a timeline that would make Marcus's criminal prosecution inevitable. The receptionist, clearly rattled by the morning's unusual visitor traffic, directed me to Conference Room A, where 2 detectives waited with Diana and what appeared to be every senior partner in the firm. At 8:52 a.m., Marcus Whitfield stepped off the elevator with his usual swagger, checking his phone and adjusting his tie. He looked like a man who owned the world. He had no idea that his world had already ended. At 8:53 a.m., his life became before and after. The conversation in Conference Room A was brief and devastating. Marcus, faced with 18 months of documented theft, surveillance footage of his affair, and the testimony of his own wife, did what lawyers do when caught red-handed. He asked for his attorney. But it was too late for attorneys. The Seattle police don't negotiate with people who steal $127,000 0 cents from client escrow accounts. At 9:17 a.m., I watched through the lobby windows as Marcus Whitfield was escorted from the building in handcuffs, past colleagues who would spend years rebuilding their firm's reputation. He looked like what he was, a man who had confused privilege with immunity and learned the difference too late. I didn't need to be present when Sarah received her own documents. Eleanor handled that delivery personally, walking into the paralegal bullpen where Sarah worked with the kind of professional courtesy that made the destruction feel inevitable rather than vindictive. According to Eleanor's later report, Sarah's reaction progressed through the 5 stages of grief in under 10 minutes. Denial, this is a mistake. Anger, he's lying about everything. Bargaining, we can work this out. Depression, sobbing at her desk, and finally acceptance, cleaning out her desk while security watched. "Where's Marcus?" she kept asking. "Someone needs to call Marcus." "Ma'am," the security guard said gently, "Mr. Whitfield is currently being processed at the King County Jail. He won't be taking calls for a while." The beautiful irony was that Sarah never saw it coming. Even as her world collapsed, she couldn't comprehend that the passive husband she'd discarded so easily might be capable of strategic thinking. She'd mistaken kindness for weakness, patience for stupidity. That evening, I sat in the kitchen of my reclaimed home, the house Sarah had tried to steal through perjury, and read the text messages that told the final chapter of her story. "David, please call me. We need to talk. I know you're angry, but this has gone too far. Marcus says you've been stalking us. That's not like you. I made a mistake. Can we please just talk?" "David, answer your damn phone. My lawyer says I need to find somewhere else to live. This isn't fair. I never meant for any of this to happen. Please, I'm sorry." I deleted each message without responding. Sarah wanted forgiveness, understanding, maybe even reconciliation. But those were gifts for people who deserved them, and Sarah had forfeited any claim to my mercy the moment she chose to destroy me rather than simply leave me. The house felt different now. Cleaner, quieter, more like home than it had in months. I'd changed the locks, updated the security system, and removed every trace of Sarah's occupancy. At 11:43 p.m., my phone rang one final time. "David?" Sarah's voice was small, broken, nothing like the confident woman who'd ordered me from my own home a week earlier. "Can you please just tell me why? Why did you do this to us?" For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the recording of her laughing about how easy I'd been to fool. I remembered her plan to claim abuse. I remembered Marcus wearing my bathrobe while reading my newspaper. "Sarah," I said quietly, "you wanted me gone from the house. Now you'll have to leave it too." And I hung up. The next morning's newspaper carried a small item about a local attorney arrested for embezzlement. It mentioned his accomplice, a paralegal who had also been terminated for ethics violations. Neither Sarah nor Marcus was named, but their professional lives were effectively over. Justice, I realized, doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it just looks like balance restored. 6 months later, I stood in the renovated kitchen of my home, preparing dinner for one and realizing I was genuinely happy for the first time in years. The house had become mine in ways it never was during my marriage. Every room reflected my choices, my preferences, my vision of what a home should be. The kitchen, where Sarah had once planned my destruction, now smelled of garlic and herbs. The bedroom where she'd plotted with Marcus had become my office. Marcus Whitfield served 18 months in minimum security prison and would never practice law again. His appeals were exhausted, his reputation destroyed, his career reduced to cautionary tale status in legal ethics classes. Sarah had found work as a paralegal in Spokane, starting over at 34, with a ruined reputation and a supervisor who would forever question her ethics. Her plan to steal half my assets had backfired spectacularly. Between legal fees, restitution, and relocation costs, she'd lost everything she'd tried to gain. Diana had emerged from the wreckage with characteristic strength. Her divorce from Marcus had been swift and devastating, leaving her with the house, the practice, and primary custody of their daughter. She'd started a new surgical practice, channeling her experience with betrayal into helping children survive their own disasters. We maintained occasional contact, not as co-conspirators, but as survivors who understood each other's journey. My own dating life had resumed cautiously. Jennifer, a software engineer I'd met at a professional conference, brought refreshing directness to our relationship. She knew about Sarah, about the divorce, about what I'd done to protect myself. Her response had been characteristically pragmatic. "Sounds like you married someone who thought she was smarter than she was. Good thing you actually were. Tonight, as I finished preparing dinner, I reflected on the man I'd become. Stronger, certainly, more cautious, absolutely, but not harder or cynical, just more discerning about who deserved my trust and affection. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Still on for tomorrow night? I'm making my famous lasagna." I smiled, typing back, "Wouldn't miss it." "Should I bring wine?" "Always. See you at 7. Simple, honest, real. The surveillance system I'd used to document Sarah's betrayal had been retired, the recordings deleted, the equipment repurposed. I no longer needed evidence of past crimes. I was too busy building a future worth protecting. Sarah texted occasionally, hollow apologies and requests for closure that I deleted without reading completely. She wanted forgiveness or acknowledgement that her punishment had been sufficient. But forgiveness wasn't mine to give, and her punishment hadn't been mine to assign. She'd simply experienced the natural consequences of her choices. I'd learned something valuable during those dark weeks in the motel. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. Hate requires investment, energy, continued emotional connection to the person who wronged you. Indifference means they no longer matter enough to inspire any emotion at all. Sarah had become irrelevant to my happiness, which made her irrelevant to my life. And irrelevance, I discovered, is the most powerful revenge of all. Outside my kitchen window, Seattle's lights twinkled in the darkness, full of people building lives and making choices and learning from mistakes. Some were probably planning betrayals. Others were probably discovering betrayals. Most were just trying to create something meaningful with whatever time and trust they had. I was part of that last group now. Someone building rather than destroying, creating rather than avenging, looking forward rather than backward. Tomorrow I would go to work, contribute to projects that mattered, and come home to a house that reflected my values rather than someone else's deceptions. Tomorrow night I would share dinner with someone who chose honesty over convenience. It wasn't the life I'd planned when I married Sarah 7 years ago. It was better. As I finished dinner and prepared for bed, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from surviving something that could have destroyed you and emerging not just intact but improved. Sarah had tried to break me and instead had freed me. Marcus had tried to replace me and instead had shown me what I didn't want to become. They'd given me the greatest gift possible, the chance to build something real on the ruins of something false. And for that, despite everything, I was almost grateful. Almost. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.